Hey, you. You're finally awake.
Welcome back to the channel, you lovely people. Today, we're going to be looking at some of the worst licensed NES games they had to offer. When you get a licensed game, back then you were quite worried because normally you'd be like, uh-oh, this game is going to be absolutely terrible. They were often seen as quick cash grabs where companies would get a license and think, oh, we can just sell the game on the name alone and not even make anything actually that good. And unfortunately, in the early days, this was pretty commonplace. You kinda tried to stay away from licensed games because they tended to be absolute dog poo-poo. I can't say any other words at this point because YouTube will add me for swearing. So today I'm going to be looking at 7 of the worst NES licensed games. Now as always, this isn't the definitive list, and if you think there's ones I should be mentioning, put it in the comments below and we can talk about it next time. As always, if you want to hear more of me, we've got a weekly podcast called Retro Wars, where each week we cover games we used to play, and you can find that wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you want to support the show financially, you can do a patreon.com/Retro Wars, where you can get involved in the show and you get your own show called DLC. Right, let's get into it, shall we? 7 of the worst licensed games for the NES. Barbie. You'd think a Barbie game would be easy to get right. It'd be fun, colourful, and full of creativity. Like, I actually liked the movie. I thought it was quite good fun. It was very colourful, and Ken was also incredibly amazing as well. However, going back to the game, it was a barely functioning side-scroller that felt more like a cynical afterthought than a real attempt to bring the doll to life. Developed by Imagineering and published by High-Tech Expressions, the game cast Barbie in a dream world setting, navigating through levels by dodging living beach balls and musical notes. Now on paper, that sounds imaginative, but then in practice it's a mess. The controls are sluggish, the platforming is awkward, and Barbie, she just looks terrible. Rather than embracing like that fashion or the Dreamhouse themes that made Barbie iconic, the game tries to force her into traditional action game mold, which doesn't really fit the brand or appeal to its intended audience. Now I know this because do you know how much Barbie stuff I've had to watch? I have a 6-year-old. I have watched so many of the Barbie adventures, I've watched all the Barbie family ones, I know all the kids, I know the parents, I've watched it all, so I know what makes Barbie tick. The Barbie's goal in this game is to collect the accessories and wake her up from her dream, but there's almost no context given for anything that happens. That's like Super Mario Land 2! They stole the idea from that, I swear to God. The level design is bland and repetitive, the enemies are nonsensical, and the colours are just rubbish. Again, just make it colourful, you'll be fine. Perhaps the biggest betrayal is how the game misunderstands its own license. Instead of presenting Barbie as an aspirational, confident character she was meant to be, this version of Barbie feels passive and lost in the world that neither empowers her nor aligns her with the brand's message of creativity and independence. Critics and players alike panned the game at release. It was seen as pandering and patronising, a game made for girls without understanding what girls actually want in a video game. Yet clearly they just want guns and action. No, they don't. Girls at that time did not want that sort of thing. Not all girls. Make it very clear, not all girls, but the majority of girls, that's what they wanted. It was another example of 90s publishers underestimating their audience. In hindsight, it's often remembered as a lazy attempt to cash in on a big name without actually delivering anything okay. It holds a place among infamous shovelware titles that were slapped together to fill toy store shelves. That's a mouthful. Toy store shelves. What's frustrating that Barbie as a brand had real potential for actually focusing on what girls, I say girls, would have liked back then. Like do story-driven adventures, puzzle-solving, fashion stuff, but none of that's here. It's just action stuff which isn't that. And that's the problem. As a platformer, it fails as well. Like, it fails as a platformer and as a Barbie game, so it just fails as everything. Again, just throw it in the bin, or throw it to me and I'll burn it in the 1-year anniversary of burning crap games. Conan. Conan the Mysteries of Time is a side-scrolling action game that borrows the name The Legendary Barbarian and promptly forgets everything that made him interesting. You'd expect brutal combat, larger-than-life bosses, and maybe some epic fantasy storytelling. Instead, you get one of the most broken and confusing platformers ever released on the NES. However, this was developed by Mindscape, and the game isn't even a Conan title. Alright, we know that one. It's actually a reskin of a completely unrelated game called Myth: History in the Making. In other words, they took a game about time travel and slapped Conan's name on it to sell more copies. Alright, Mario Land 2. Yeah, okay, I have a thing with Mario Land 2, leave me alone. The bait and switch portrays the IP in the worst way. Conan himself was all about muscle, might, and mythic fantasy. But here he's dying from bumping into frogs and falling into pixel-wide gaps in a world that makes zero narrative sense. And that's the thing, Conan is about ripping people's heads off and shoving big swords up their ass. A sword. Okay, I mean a metal sword. Oh god, we can go either way with this one. You know what I mean. But that's not this game here. The level design is punishingly bad as well. Enemies respawn constantly and you have to make pixel perfect jump using crap controls, and again, that's not what Conan's about. Conan should have been like a golden axe, that's what you should have really done it. It's underwhelming, the sprites look crap, the sprites look really bad. Conan himself looks so bad. You can't sit there and go, oh yeah, that's Conan the Barbarian, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger, I know where he's from. I know he's from comic book land as well, so leave me alone. Critics at the time are merciless. The game was widely regarded as one of the worst on the system, and fans of Conan were especially disappointed. They'd waited years for a proper adaptation, only to receive a clunky mess that had nothing to do with the source material. Well, there's going to be plenty of disappointed fans on this list. The legacy of Conan on the NES is one of deception. It's what happens when a license is used purely as a sales gimmick. There's no respect for the IP, no connection to the character, and no fun to be had. Even among those it's so bad it's good games, Conan is considered a chore to play. If you're a fan of Conan, stay absolute clear. This game may as well be called Random Time Travel Guy, the game, because it sure as hell isn't Conan. Well, Superman's been on this show before, hasn't he? So how do you ruin Superman? Again? Well, just ask Kemco. Their NES adaptation turns a Man of Steel into a confused weakling reporter who can't fly properly and gets hurt by rats. Yes, rats. The game begins with you playing as Clark Kent, wandering through a dull and generic version of Metropolis. To become Superman, you have to find a phone booth, which is a neat nod to the comics, but it quickly turns into a repetitive chore. And once you do become Superman, the experience is shockingly underwhelming. You'd expect laser vision, super speed, or maybe some good flight mechanics. What you get instead is limited jumping, weak punches, and barely functioning special powers that require a separate energy meter. Superman can't even fly indefinitely. He just hops between the tops of buildings like a flea with poor knees. And that's the thing I keep saying with this. Superman should be able to one-shot everything in a split second. You shouldn't even have the chance to think about what's going on before your brain explodes. That's what should happen in a good old Superman film. Don't make me direct any Superman films, it'd be far too graphic. The game's missions are nonsensical and vague. You wander around aimlessly, talking to NPCs who repeat the same lines and offer no useful guidance. Well, that's about standard. Combat is stiff, hit detection is unreliable, and the constant need to transform back and forth between Superman and Clark becomes tiresome fast. Why do you need to transform back into Clark? Why? Stupid. No one likes Clark Kent. I don't like Clark Kent. Worse, the graphics are just crap. Metropolis looks like a copy-paste city block repeated over and over, and Superman's sprite looks more like a budget mascot than a legendary DC icon. And there's no real sense of power and momentum in anything he does. He's like, meh, meh. No iconic theme here, just a dull chip tune that loops around that will absolutely grate on your ears very quickly. Reviews were harsh, with many players citing its confusing objectives and weak gameplay loop as major issues. It's a game that didn't make players feel like Superman, it makes them feel lost, and that's the point, you should feel like Superman. Even today, the game is a common punchline among retro gamers. It's quite amazing we have both this and Superman 64 to laugh at in this show. The real tragedy is that the core idea, be Clark Kent and Superman in one game, could actually be quite promising. You could do it well, maybe him being a journalist, detective sort of thing, although that's kind of Batman's thing, being a detective. Either way, it could have worked in some way. But poor execution, bad design, and a complete lack of narrative drive made Superman for the NES a disaster in tights. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. There were actually 2 NES games based on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which makes me think, why? Why? Some smart arse is going to put in the comments here why that is, but still, why? The one we're going to focus on was from Taito, that one. It's the one that totally was terrible. While there was a Lucasfilm version that was passable, this release is a baffling mishmash of genres, poor controls, and wasted opportunity. You play as Indiana, obs, trekking through loosely connected levels inspired by the movie. But instead of a thrilling archaeological adventure, you get tedious platforming, weak combat, and vague objectives. The game is going back to Back to the Future, it just struggles with identity. It tries to blend that action with puzzles and stealth, but nothing feels polished. There's no real sense of progress here, again you just have random scenes that happen to vaguely resemble moments in the movie. The portrayal to the license is clear from the start. Indiana Jones is a hero known for his intelligence, wit, and daring escapes. But here, he just moves so slow and gets taken out by pigeons and spiders. There's none of the movie's excitement or pacing, just slow, uninspired gameplay. You'll also find pointless backtracking and cheap deaths, spikes appear from nowhere, platform disappear mid-jump, and the game actively feels like it's trying to hurt you, which flies in the face of Indy's clever, resourceful nature. Enemies take multiple hits with no visual reaction, and Indy himself has no effective way to defend himself. His whip is rather underpowered or completely missing depending on the level. See, this is Castlevania, you'd have none of these problems. It's baffling how little effort was put into making players feel like the heroic archaeologist. The graphics here are terrible. They're very drab, they're lifeless, and the environments are poorly drawn. The sprites just look terrible, and it's hard to tell what anything's supposed to be. Like, Indy himself barely looks like Harrison Ford. I know that's very hard in an NES console, but come on, at least try. Like, instead of capitalizing on the famous movie scenes like the motorcycle escape or the tank chase, this game reduces them to generic platforming sections. There's no pulse-pounding chase music, no dramatic tension, and certainly no sense of danger or adventure. Even the levels that do try to mirror the movie scenes, like the Zeppelin or the Catacombs, they just feel like generic levels with like, oh shit, yeah, we better put Indiana Jones in there, that's the game, isn't it? Critics and fans were quick to call it out as being a lifeless adaptation. Most agreed it didn't capture the thrill of the films, and retro reviews still place it among the NES's most forgettable licensed flops. If anything, the game's legacy is a prime example of the era's careless IP handling. Indiana Jones' Last Crusade should have been a thrilling treasure hunt, instead it's a dry, frustrating slog. Back to the Future 2 and 3. You guys let me know a lot about this one in the bottom of the barrel NES game, so don't worry, I listen to my fans. And when you think of Back to the Future, you probably imagine the DeLoreans, hoverboard, and thrilling time-travelling adventures. Unfortunately, not all that excitement is captured in Back to the Future Part 2 and 3 for the NES. Released in 1990 by LJN, an infamous name in bad licensed games, the title attempted to cram two beloved films into a one 8-bit package. But what they got was a bewildering mess of confusing objectives, repetitive mini-games, and a complete lack of storytelling or charm. It's one of those rare games that only not only fails to entertain, but seems to frustrate anyone who plays it. Right out of the gate, the game bombards players with vague instructions and no clear direction. You begin as Marty McFly, tasked with collecting objects that are out of place in time, which is as convoluted as it sounds. Yeah, that is absolutely ridiculous. There's no narrative context to explain what's going on, no voiceover, which, well, I suppose you're not going to get that with an NES game, no cutscenes, and hardly any in-game text. It assumes you've watched both movies and somehow also understand how to fix the time stream using a pogo stick and a slingshot. Yeah, they're the actual mechanics in the game, not utter bullshit. If you're expecting iconic film moments, no, don't. The game's structure is broken into side-scrolling segments where Marty must jump on platforms and avoid enemies to reach buildings. Once inside, you play bizarre mini-games that range from dull to outright broken. In one, you're dodging projectiles while collecting clocks, in other, you're playing a primitive puzzle game. These activities are meant to correct time anomalies. What? Now that is some bullshit right there. That is, how can you just make up something and hope it fits? Ridiculous. Graphically, the game is horrible. The environments are dull and repetitive, and doesn't really match what the NES can really do. Character sprites are stiff and poorly animated, and lack any of the personality you expect from a charismatic movie franchise. Marty himself just looks horrific rather than the iconic hero played by Michael J. Fox. The story, if you could call it that, is almost non-existent. The game barely references any major plot points from the two films. There's no Doc Brown exposition, no dramatic time travel sequences, no explanation of the stakes. Instead, it's just a series of disconnected levels where you fix time by doing these stupid tasks. It's hard to believe this is supposed to represent one of the most beloved film trilogies of the 1980s. The lack of narrative cohesion makes the experience feel more like a bad time travel game rather than an official adaptation. Critics and players alike pan the game upon release. Even in an era where movie tie-ins are rarely good, Back to the Future Part 2 and 3 stood out as particularly lazy. Magazines at the time noted its poor graphics, confusing gameplay, and lack of originality. And modern-day game reviewers have been equally as harsh, placing it as one of the worst of the all-time list, hence why I'm doing it. The legacy of this game is one of wasted opportunity. With such a rich time-hopping source material, the NES could have had a creative platform and action puzzle game that actually focused on the two films. Instead, what we got was a shallow, tedious set of barely functioning mechanics wrapped in a recognisable logo. It is really how a publisher can rush out a product to capitalise on a movie's release without even giving a rat's arse if it's actually playable or enjoyable. Ultimately, Back to the Future Part 2 and 3 is remembered for all the wrong reasons. It's not just a bad game, it's a disservice to one of cinema's most beloved trilogies. With muddled gameplay, ugly graphics, awful music, and a lack of coherent storytelling, it stands as a warning to future developers, and no amount of branding can save a game this broken. As Doc Brown might say, the future is what you make it, and LGN made it a nightmare. Jim Henson's Muppet Adventure, Chaos at the Carnival. We've had the Muppets on here before, and like I said this back then, whenever you expect a game from the Muppets, you expect it to be whimsical, musical, and full of charm. What we got instead with Chaos at the Carnival was a disjointed, poorly programmed collection of dull minigames masquerading as a full adventure, and I hate ones that do that. Developed by High Tech Expressions, the game follows Kermit as he tries to rescue Miss Piggy from an evil carnival, because that makes sense. Like, it sounds like a fun setup, but the execution is an absolute mess. You have to guide the Muppets through disconnected levels that range from a clunky space shooter to bland driving games. Like, each minigame is more frustrating than the last. The controls are either oversensitive or sluggish, and there's no consistency in the mechanics. You're constantly thrown into these new gameplay styles with no tutorial and explanation, and it's like, right, just do that. Why? And this just leaves it with one of those identity crises again. Like, one minute you're flying through space as Gonzo dodging asteroids, the next you're in a bumper boat navigating a broken maze. Like, each game controls differently, but none of them control actually well. The IP portrayal again is comical. The Muppets are known for their wit, parody, and lovable characters, but none of that comes through here. The humour's completely gone, replaced with confusing objectives and punishing difficulty. Fozzie, Gonzo, and Animal all appear, but they're barely animated, barely recognisable, and bring none of their personalities with them. The visuals here are terrible. Again, they've not focused on one, they've just spread it all too thin. It's so hard to believe this game is associated with Jim Henson's magical legacy. There's also very little in terms of storytelling. You just told Miss Piggy's been kidnapped, and then it's like, off you go, do this. It all accumulates in a final boss battle with Dr. Grump, an original villain so boring he makes Statler and Waldorf seem dangerous, and to be fair, they can be dangerous, their sense of wit is hilarious. He has no connection to the Muppets world and no personality, just another enemy to be awkwardly avoided or fought in a glitchy minigame. Reviews were extremely harsh even then. Critics pointed out the game's lack of polish, odd design choices, and wasted potential. And for Muppets fans, you were probably gutted because you were thinking, oh, it's the Muppets, I want to play the Muppets. Nope. In retrospect, Chaos of the Carnival feels like a cash-in made without Henson's involvement or approval. It just lacks the heart, humour, and cohesion everything the Muppet stands for. This one's not just bad, it's a total disservice to one of the most iconic children's properties of all time. And finally, Friday the 13th.
What is that? What is that?
Oh, the rage some of you are having right now. I can already see it. You're running up like Shane, like, where is he? Where's that comment? Where's that dislike button? Calm down, everyone. Calm down. I am joking. Look, when I put Friday the 13th in there last time, I have played this game, and I will admit this, I'm a big boy. When I did it for the podcast, I had to rush through it because some of the games I play, I have to do very quickly. I did it without an instruction manual, and I accept I wasn't giving it a game justice because I was just trying to speed through it and not spend the time I needed to learn the systems properly. So, I'm hearing you, everybody. I will remove Friday the 13th as one of the worst licensed games and also one of the worst games on the platform. I can hear from you. I said I will hear the criticism, so calm down, internet. We're not talking about it anymore. You're all probably thinking, I hate you, you bastard. You baited us in with the thumbnail. I did, because I thought it'd be funny, because I'm a horrible person. But hopefully that's why you like me. Alright? Let's get into the real last worst one that I think is a terrible disgrace. Ghostbusters. A game so infamously bad that even its creators later apologised for it. Developed by Activision, this adaptation of the smash hit movie is shockingly lifeless, repetitive, and completely void of the energy and fun that made the film a cultural phenomenon. And bear in mind, I love the Ghostbusters films. I think the first two are some of the funniest films I have ever seen. Bill Murray as Peter Venkman is an absolute god. The timing, the portrayal is just mwah, chef's kiss. But instead of playing as a ghost-catching team saving New York, you spend most of the time driving around a car on a map screen, earning money to buy equipment and engaging in short, clunky ghost-catching segments that offer no thrills. The in-game economy is actually broken. You must buy ghost-catching gear, but the prices are exorbitant and the money grind is slow. It's so bad you'll probably go bankrupt before you make it halfway. Gameplay is absolutely tedious. Driving your car means burning through fuel, forcing you to grind for money just to continue playing. Although to be fair, that's probably how it is now. Fuel prices are so expensive right now, I dare not drive sometimes. Do I need to go to the shop? Do my children need feeding? Probably should do that. Now actually, once you get to a building when you decide to drive your car, the ghost catching mechanics are stiff and slow with terrible hit detection and no sense of momentum. The total portrayal of the IP is just horrific. There's no witty banter, no supernatural mystery, no memorable characters, just a generic Ghostbusters title slapped on a shallow resource management game with awful action segments. Like, who the fuck thought Ghostbusters needs to be a resource management game? It should be about, like, catching Slimer, doing all that sort of stuff you saw in the movie, fighting the demons, all that sort of fun you could have had. But no, driving your car around, buying fuel. Ugh. Graphically, the game is embarrassingly plain. Characters are tiny, the buildings are indistinguishable, and there's no variety or personality to anything you see on the screen. Even the ghost designs are just forgettable blobs. Like, there is the Ghostbusters theme music. That's good. Yes. But it's a 10-second loop, but it'll play over and over again until your ears pop off. And now, I bought the Ghostbusters CD. That was my first ever single. But I don't want to hear a 10-second loop of it over and over again. The infamous staircase segment also deserves its own paragraph. It's a vertical climb where you're bombarded by ghosts as you slowly inch forward. If you fail, you're sent back to the beginning. And there are no continues, no checkpoints, just pure punishment for daring to play to the end. Adding insult to injury, once you reach the top, you're given a final confrontation that barely counts a boss fight. No Proton Stream Showdown, just a limp finish to an already painful experience. And there's no real co-op mode either, despite the film featuring a team of heroes. Critics slammed it for its boring gameplay, ugly visuals, and confusing objectives. Fans of the movie felt betrayed by a game that had no spirit, no style, and no respect for the source material. Its legacy is cemented as one of the most infamous NES disasters. It shows up on nearly every worst games list and is often cited as an example of how not to do a movie adaptation. In the end, Ghostbusters on the NES isn't just a bad game, it's a horrific tale. The license may be really good, but you've actually got to make a good game that I'm actually going to enjoy, instead of sucking all the soul out of it and making me play absolute garbage crap and try and drive a car around to get goddamn fuel! Sorry. And that's it. 7 of the worst licensed games for the NES. As I said at the beginning, have I got it right? Have I got it wrong? Let me know in the comments below if there's others I should be talking about. And if you think I've deserved it, please leave a like and comment as we make our way to 5,000 subscribers. My name's been Danny, and I'll see you all in 3 days for another video. You take care of yourself. Bye-bye.